In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Logic Pro to create a powerful harmony director that can be used in online teaching. If you want to skip ahead, links are down below. This is a harmony director, and it costs between $700 and $900. And it's a great teaching tool, but there's an alternative. This is Logic Pro, which by the way has a 90-day free trial, and it can plug into any MIDI keyboard using a USB cable, and it costs $199. So now we have two questions to answer. First, how well does it work? I'll spoil it for you, shockingly well. Just watch the rest of this video. The second question is, if I could buy Logic Pro for $199, which, by the way, if you're an educator, you can get the Apple Pro Apps bundle for education, which comes with Final Cut Pro. Nonetheless, if I could buy Logic Pro for $190, use the savings to buy additional accessories like a MIDI keyboard, a Dr. Beat metronome, and even an audio interface and mics, or even a computer, why would I buy a harmony director? Now, I think the harmony director is a great product, but it costs us $700 or more. And I don't know about you, but if I spend that kind of money without doing much research, I'm gonna get into some trouble. So if you're planning to save some money, let's get started. So you wanna start off with a new empty project. So we're gonna create several new tracks so we can build up a library of instruments to use for our harmony director. So I'm going to hit Command-Option-N to create a new track. I'm gonna do an audio track on input 1, use whatever your device is, and I'll hit create. So now I have a new audio track. Now I already did this, so I'm creating a speaker track, which is what you're hearing me through right now. And if I go to the icon, I can change this now to whatever icon I choose to. So I'm gonna pick this one right here as my speaker track. I'm gonna create another channel, Command-Option-N, audio channel. I'm gonna pick my second input of my audio interface to create a metronome track. So I'm gonna title it metronome. And then I'm gonna pick a new icon as a metronome. Now, my metronome, I have a Dr. Beat connected to it. So if I turn on my Dr. Beat, I can actually hear it through this. Now, if you don't have a Dr. Beat metronome, you can use a Korg TM60, or you can use Logic Pro's built-in beat machine as your metronome. So I'm gonna hit Command-Option-N, create a new software instrument. I'm gonna put default patch, hit create, and I'm gonna go to search sounds and type in beat machine. Double click it, click away, hit Y to close that library, and now we have a beat machine as our metronome. I'll go over this in just a sec. The next instrument I'm gonna use is a piano. Once again, Command-Option-N, and I like the Yamaha piano. You can use whatever one you prefer. I just like the Yamaha, it sounds pretty good. I'm gonna add a flute solo. I'm gonna add an oboe, bassoon, the clarinet solo, which actually gets down to the range of a bass clarinet. Now for the saxes, trumpets, and trombones and horns, I like to use the studio instruments. So for a saxophone, I'm gonna type in Studio Alto Sax 1. For the tenor sax, I'm gonna type in Studio Tenor Sax 1. Bari sax is Studio Bari Sax. French horn is just simply French horn solo. The trumpet, I'm using Studio Trumpet 1. Trombone is Studio Trombone 1. And instead of using tubas, I like to use a Studio Bass Trombone. For this setup, I also like to use the orchestral kit, the Bluebird drum set because it sounds great for snare, and finally a glockenspiel. Ooh, one instrument I did forget to add was another software instrument for the wedding organ. I noticed those harmony directors have a nice, good organ sound, so I prefer Logic's wedding organ, and then go into wedding organ settings and be sure to add in a bass 1 or 2. This way when you play it, it has that lovely bass line. So once your library is filled up with all the instruments you need, click in the middle of the main window, hit Y on the keyboard to close the library, and I to close the inspector. Now you can click on an instrument, hit Command-K, and you can play it. This keyboard here also has obviously sustain. You can move between octaves and change modulation, pitch bend, and velocity. To close the keyboard, hit Command-K to close it back. If you want to dive into each instrument setting, you can by hitting I on the keyboard to bring up the inspector. I would take away this little track triangle to give you some more room. And if you go into each instrument, this right here underneath the EQ is going to be the instrument. This one's a sampler technically. and you can dive into all the little nitty-gritty details of each instrument. Now this is why I prefer the studio instruments over the regular instruments. So if you have studio saxes, trombones, and trumpets, they have a different instrument patch they're using. So this one has horns. I can go into it and now it has access to articulation as well as the ability to change on and off monophonic. Monophonic being only the ability to play one note at a time. But if you change it and turn it to off, you can now play several notes at once. You also have the ability to change the vibrato, humanize it, and also the volume of each note in attack and release, which is very helpful. Logic Pro can also record and mix whatever you like by using the transport tools on the top here. To mix things, you could just hit X on the keyboard and move these sliders up and down to change the volumes of anything you like. So that way you get the proper volume for each instrument you want. If you like to use Logic Pro's built-in metronome, you can hit K on the keyboard or click on this icon right here. Then when you hit the spacebar, it'll play in the background. Now I find Logic Pro's built-in metronome to be a little soft and quiet, so to make it louder, you can hit X on the keyboard, hit All for the tracks, so you can view all tracks, and if you scroll to your very right, so over here is the very left, I'm gonna go to the very right, and then if you find a track called Click, which is down here, you'll see an instrument called the Klopfgeist, or Knocking Ghost. And you can change this too on the tonality to like something a little higher. I like 0.8, which tends to make it a little bit louder. And then you can even drive up the level to make it a little bit louder as you hit the space bar. I'll bring up that tonality a little bit, maybe even 0.9. That's much better. So it's a lot louder of a metronome that punches through whatever music you're working on. To close this, hit X on the keyboard. Now, if you want to dive in more into the drum machine and creating custom beats and different projects, you can go to that by clicking on the instrument for the drum machine, then hitting E on the keyboard or clicking the edit tool here. So I'm gonna hit E on the keyboard. Now we're in the step sequencer. You might see the piano roll, so just make sure you click on step sequencer. If you need to resize your window, pull up and down on this box right here. Now right now we're currently seeing 16 steps, which is 4/4 broken into 4 subdivisions. You can change it and go a little bit more, even up to 64. I'm gonna keep it at 16 for now. So if we want to kick on 1, 2, 3, and 4, we can add it right there. If we want hi-hats set in for each eighth note, and if we want a snare on beats 2 and 4, you can do that. And then now hit the spacebar, and you have a custom beat set aside. Now, if you created a beat and you wanted to repeat over and over throughout your track, just come down to your region here that your beat machine created, hover to the right-hand corner of it, and you'll see this little circle tool, and that means to loop it. And you can drag it across your entire project. Now, when you hit the spacebar, it will keep playing and not stop. Pretty handy. Now, I would recommend using a MIDI keyboard, then going to Logic Pro's Control Surfaces settings, then going to Controller Assignments. When you're in here, this is where it's going to show your MIDI keyboard. So mine is an Axiom 49, but nonetheless, it could help you teach Logic to use and program certain keys and knobs on your MIDI keyboard to use for Logic. For example, if I want to create a mute button for my speaker channel here, all I need to do is click on Learn Mode. It'll turn blue. Go to the speaker channel and hit the mute button. Now after I click it again, it'll show Logic here as mute. Now I just need to hit the key on my MIDI keyboard. And Logic has now assigned it to that track, and I could turn off the learn mode. So now if I hit that key on my keyboard, it'll mute my channel. Now let's say you want to program this volume knob here to be controlled by one of your MIDI keys. To do that, go into Logic Pro once again, go to Control Surfaces and Controller Assignments. Click on Learn Mode, then go to the volume slider and rock it back and forth and let go. You'll see the label change here to volume. Then move the slider on your MIDI keyboard. By default, Logic assigns it to the selected track. So if I move between different tracks, that one slider will now be controlling each track, which can be handy. If you want Logic to assign it to the first audio track you created, go to Audio and then put Audio 1. Now it's set to my speaker. If I want to go to Audio track 2 for my metronome, I can do that. Notice that it doesn't matter what track I selected, it'll still move that slider. You can also set one for your master as well as each software instrument. One of the annoyances I had with this harmony director was whenever I clicked on an instrument, the horn sound sustain would always be set to be expressive medium. So when you played a note, it'd always do this kind of wobble expressive sound, and I always preferred the sustain sound, which kept the note sustained. But one workaround that I found was to program that sustain as a MIDI command. And to do that is you click on a studio instrument, go into the smart controls in Logic, and you'll find the articulation right here. So now I can move around and change it to sustain. Now this smart control is MIDI programmable, meaning that I can assign it to a key on my keyboard. To do that, we go into Logic's control surfaces and controller assignments. I'm gonna move this screen off to the side, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on learn mode. And then I'm gonna go to the articulation and move it to sustain. Now it doesn't matter what you move it to, it doesn't really mind because this is all still gonna pop up as a label called articulation. I'm gonna keep it as a channel strip and selected track. That way if I move to different instruments, it'll still be selected. Next, I'll keep the learn mode feature on without touching it, and I'll hit a key on my MIDI keyboard. You'll now notice that Logic assigned an input for this on a certain key. Now, if this was to be moved now to a different articulation, I can just hit that key now and it'll change the articulation. Now, if I don't want this rotating through a different selection of articulations, I can go straight to sustain by going into the mode here and changing it to direct. Now when I hit that key on that MIDI keyboard, it goes straight to sustain and doesn't change. So if I switch to different instruments and they have a different articulation, such as this trumpet here, I can just hit that MIDI keyboard key and it goes to sustain. To switch between instruments in Logic, it's pretty intuitive. That's all you do is click between different instruments and you can switch. You can also use the arrow up and down keys on your keyboard. Now, I like to be hands-free from the computer sometimes, and I want to be able to switch instruments on the fly using my MIDI keyboard. To do this, you need to go into Logic Pro's key commands by going to Logic Pro, Key Commands, and Edit. Search for Next Track, click on Select Next Track, then click on Learn New Assignment. Hit the key on your keyboard for it, and it will assign the command for it. Now search for a previous track, hit Select Previous Track, click Learn New Assignment, and then hit the opposite key on your MIDI keyboard to program it. Now I can use my MIDI keyboard to switch between different sounds for my harmony director. Finally, one of the biggest features of a harmony director is the ability to change the tuning. You can do this as well in Logic. First, you'll need to go to the project settings. So go to File, then go to Project Settings and Tuning. Right here is where you'll find all the different abilities to tune the instruments. You can change the pitch of the software instrument, and you can also change the scale that it's assigned to. So this is equal tempered. So if I play a C major chord, it's all equal tempered. Sounds great with the piano. If you want to, you can change it to a fixed tuning, which Logic gives you a ton of different settings you can pick. I'll just pick something at random. It sounds kind of weird with the piano. And you can also use a user specified, or my favorite, which is Hermo tuning, and set it to classic, pop, or baroque. And this is great for all the band instruments and software instruments you use. So if I play a wedding organ, a C major chord, you can change the tuning from equal to tempered. Logic also has a smart ability to detect what chord you're playing and adjust the tuning. So if I play a C major chord, you can see it pop in the top up here, versus if I played a C minor chord, it gets detected, and thus the tuning also gets adjusted. I hope you found this video helpful. If you can, please leave a comment down below letting me know what else you would like to see. I also have a couple of videos here that you can check out to help you out with your music needs. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.